I'm Eleanor Gardner and today I turned 75 years old. Instead of blowing out candles surrounded by family, I sat alone in a corner booth at Denny's with a single slice of pie. My children and grandchildren were dining in a 5-star restaurant in Rome, using $50,000 of my retirement savings. The money I'd scrimped and saved for decades was funding their luxury vacation while I celebrated alone. Little did they know I had a plan brewing that would change everything. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to see how I turned the tables on my ungrateful family. I wasn't always alone. For 40 years I worked as a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital, often pulling double shifts to keep food on the table after my husband Frank died of a heart attack when our children were still young. Richard was only 12, Margaret was 9, and little Thomas was barely 4 when I became both mother and father to them. We struggled financially, but I never let them feel poor. Every penny I could spare went into making sure they had decent clothes, school supplies, and at least modest birthday celebrations. Our home on Maple Street wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Frank and I had purchased it when we first got married, and I'd paid off the mortgage by working those extra shifts. It was a 4-bedroom colonial with a big backyard where the kids had played as children and later, where my grandchildren had their Easter egg hunts and summer barbecues. The maple tree Frank planted the day we moved in had grown massive over the 45 years I'd lived there, providing shade for countless family gatherings. Richard, my oldest, followed in his father's footsteps and became an accountant. He married Brenda, a real estate agent, and they gave me 2 grandchildren, Ashley and Kevin, now 17 and 15. Richard was always the serious one, meticulous with numbers just like his father, but lacking Frank's warmth and generosity of spirit. Margaret, my middle child, became a high school English teacher. She and her husband Paul, a sales manager at a car dealership, lived just 20 minutes away. Margaret had inherited my practicality, but developed a taste for luxury items that her teacher's salary couldn't quite support. Still, she called regularly and organized our holiday gatherings, which made me overlook her occasional hints about needing financial help. Thomas, my baby, had always been the dreamer. He bounced between careers before settling into marketing. His wife Kathleen worked in pharmaceutical sales, and they were always talking about their next big break or investment opportunity. They never seemed to build any savings, despite their dual incomes. For years we maintained what I thought was a close family bond. Sunday dinners became our tradition after the kids moved out. Even as they built their own lives, they'd gather around my dining room table each week for pot roast or fried chicken. Holidays were elaborate affairs with everyone pitching in. Though I did most of the cooking and all of the cleaning, I didn't mind. Having everyone together filled the house with the noise and energy I missed after they'd grown up and moved out. When I retired at 72, I had managed to save nearly $200,000. It wasn't a fortune, but combined with my modest pension and Social Security, it would be enough for a comfortable retirement. I'd planned for years of simple living, occasional visits to the beach, and perhaps a cruise someday. Mostly, I looked forward to spending more time with my family, especially my grandchildren before they left for college. Last winter, I received concerning news from my doctor. My blood pressure was dangerously high, and tests revealed early signs of kidney dysfunction. Nothing terminal, but Dr. Bennett made it clear that I needed to reduce stress and take better care of myself. It was this health scare that prompted me to add Richard, my accountant's son, to my bank accounts. Just in case something happens, I told him, trusting him completely with my financial security. He had access to everything, including my retirement fund that I'd so carefully built over decades of saving. "Mom, this is smart planning," Richard had said, patting my hand in that condescending way of his. "I'll make sure everything is handled properly if you're ever unable to." I believed him. After all, he was my son, and I had raised him to be responsible and trustworthy. How could I have known that giving him access to my accounts would lead to the greatest betrayal of my life? As my 75th birthday approached in early June, I dropped hints to my children about wanting to celebrate. Nothing extravagant, just a family dinner perhaps, or even a small gathering in my backyard. 75 felt significant, a milestone worth marking together. "We'll definitely do something special, Mom," Margaret had assured me over the phone in April. "Just leave it to us." I noticed the first strange behaviors about 3 weeks before my birthday. Richard canceled our regular Sunday dinner, citing a work emergency. The following week, Thomas and Kathleen begged off, claiming their son had a baseball tournament. Margaret still came but spent most of the time texting and taking calls in the other room. "Is everything all right?" I asked as she hurriedly packed up leftovers. "Just busy with end-of-school year stuff," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "You know how hectic June can be." One afternoon, I stopped by Richard's house unexpectedly to drop off a casserole dish Brenda had left at my home. As I approached the front door, I overheard animated conversation through the open window. "Mom doesn't need to know the details," Richard was saying. "What difference does a few weeks make? We'll celebrate when we get back." "But her actual birthday." Brenda's voice trailed off as they moved deeper into the house. I stood frozen on the porch, casserole dish in hand, a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knocked loudly, and the house went silent before Richard appeared at the door, looking flustered. "Mom! What a surprise," he said, blocking the entrance slightly. "I brought Brenda's dish back," I said, trying to peek around him into the house. "Everything okay?" Fine. "Just work stuff. Thanks for the dish. I'll see you Sunday, okay?" He practically shut the door in my face. The week of my birthday, all 3 of my children had excuses for why they couldn't come over. Richard claimed an audit emergency. Margaret said she had sudden summer school responsibilities, and Thomas mentioned a business trip. None of them acknowledged that my birthday was approaching, not even in passing. Still hopeful, I spent the day before my birthday preparing a special meal. I made my famous pot roast with carrots and potatoes, baked dinner rolls from scratch, and crafted an intricate chocolate cake with buttercream frosting. I set the table for 8, using my good china and the crystal glasses that had been a wedding gift from Frank's parents. On the morning of my birthday, June 10th, I woke early and put on a new dress I'd bought specially. I styled my silver hair carefully and even applied mascara and lipstick, things I rarely bothered with anymore. As the day wore on, my phone remained silent. By 4 o'clock, I realized no one was coming. Not my children, not my grandchildren. No one. I checked my mailbox around 5 and found a single card addressed in Margaret's hasty scrawl. Inside was a generic birthday message and signatures from everyone, obviously collected in advance. No personal messages, no promises to celebrate later. Just "Happy birthday, Mom," and "Love you, Grandma," scribbled as an afterthought. Fighting back tears, I returned to my dining room with its perfectly set table for 8, an elaborate meal that no one would eat. I sat alone in my usual chair, served myself a small portion of food I no longer had an appetite for, and tried to swallow past the lump in my throat. After picking at my dinner, I placed a single candle in the center of the chocolate cake. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, my voice breaking as I blew out the solitary flame. That evening, scrolling through Facebook to distract myself from the pain, I froze at a photo that appeared in my feed. It was posted by my grandson Kevin, clearly not understanding the impact it would have. The image showed my entire family: Richard, Brenda, Margaret, Paul, Thomas, Kathleen, and both grandchildren, seated around an elaborate table at a restaurant with the Colosseum visible through a window behind them. The caption read, "First night in Rome. Amazing dinner with the fam." It was timestamped just 2 hours earlier. My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone. The betrayal cut deep, stealing my breath. My family hadn't just forgotten my birthday. They had deliberately planned an elaborate European vacation, timed exactly during my milestone birthday, and hadn't even considered including me. As tears finally spilled onto my cheeks, I had no idea that this was just the beginning of the betrayal. The discovery of my family dining in Rome shattered something inside me, but it was only the tip of the iceberg. The next morning, still reeling from hurt and confusion, I decided to investigate further. Why hadn't they mentioned this trip? How long had they been planning it? And most importantly, how were they affording such a luxury vacation when they were always complaining about money? I logged into my email account, searching for any messages from Richard about family plans. Finding nothing, I decided to check my bank statements. Richard had insisted on setting up paperless billing to save trees, but I still liked to review my accounts regularly. When the statements loaded, I felt physically ill. There, dated just 2 weeks earlier, was a withdrawal from my retirement account for $50,000. The transaction description read, "Transfer to checking rec by Richard Gardner." I hadn't authorized this. I hadn't known anything about it. With trembling fingers, I checked my savings account. Another $15,000 had been withdrawn the same day. My checking account showed recent purchases at Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, and several high-end luggage stores. In total, nearly $70,000 of my retirement savings had vanished in a matter of weeks. I stumbled to the family computer in the den, the one Richard had set up for me but that everyone used when visiting. Searching through the browser history, I found travel websites, Italian restaurant reservations, and confirmation emails for a luxury villa rental in Tuscany. The emails were in Richard's account, which he'd apparently forgotten to log out of. The trip wasn't just a few days in Rome. They had planned a 3-week tour of Italy, with first-class flights and 5-star accommodations throughout. As I dug deeper, I discovered the planning had begun months ago. There were emails dating back to February discussing the trip, coinciding exactly with when I'd added Richard to my accounts after my health scare. What hit me hardest was an email from Richard to his siblings. "Mom's retirement fund is just sitting there, and with her health issues, she'll probably never use most of it. I think we deserve this trip after all we've done for her over the years. We'll still leave her plenty, and we can celebrate her birthday when we get back." My own son had justified stealing from me by deciding I would die soon enough that I wouldn't need my savings. And what exactly had they done for me that entitled them to my money? The occasional Sunday visit? The holidays where I did all the work? The birthdays where they showed up for free food and left me with the cleanup? More painful revelations followed. In a group chat between my children that someone had accessed on the family computer, Margaret had written, "Do you think we should have invited Mom? I feel a little guilty." Thomas had replied, "Are you kidding? She'd slow us down completely. She can barely walk up the hill to her mailbox. Can you imagine her trying to climb the steps at the Vatican? Plus, she'd just complain about the money we're spending." Richard's response had been the cruelest. "Mom had her chance to travel when she was younger. She chose to work all those extra shifts instead. That's on her. This trip is for us." They hadn't just excluded me. They had discussed me, dismissed me, and decided I didn't deserve to enjoy the money I had earned over a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice. With growing dread, I called Richard's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later, and this time he answered, the sounds of a busy Italian street in the background. "Mom, is everything okay?" He sounded annoyed at the interruption. "No, Richard, everything is not okay," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I saw Kevin's Facebook post. You're all in Italy." A brief silence followed. "Oh, yeah, we decided to take a family trip. We're going to celebrate your birthday when we get back, don't worry." "With my money?" I asked bluntly. Another pause. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice hardening. "I checked my accounts. You took $50,000 from my retirement fund without asking me, plus the money from my savings." Richard's tone changed immediately. "Look, Mom, I was going to tell you. We deserved a vacation after these past few years. The pandemic was hard on everyone, and the kids missed out on so much. We're using some of your money, yes, but you're not using it anyway. We'll pay you back eventually." "You stole from me," I whispered, the reality of it sinking in fully. "That's a harsh way to put it," Richard replied defensively. "I'm on your accounts. It's a family fund, really. Besides, we took care of you all these years. Checked in on you, had you over for holidays. We deserved something for ourselves." I was speechless. In Richard's mind, the basic decency of maintaining a relationship with their mother was a burden that deserved financial compensation. After a lifetime of sacrificing for them, they viewed what remained of my savings as their entitlement. "When will you be back?" I asked, my voice strangely calm despite the storm raging inside me. 3 weeks from yesterday. Look, I've got to go. The kids want gelato, and we have tickets for a tour. We can discuss this when we get home, okay? Try not to stress about it. Remember what the doctor said about your blood pressure. He hung up before I could respond. They would be gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which they would be enjoying luxury accommodations, gourmet meals, and cultural experiences, all paid for with money I had saved to support myself in my final years. I sat in stunned silence, the phone still in my hand. The betrayal was complete. My children hadn't just forgotten my birthday or excluded me from a family trip. They had stolen my financial security and justified it as their right. And they fully expected me to accept it, to be waiting with open arms when they returned, ready to forgive and forget. But something had broken inside me. Something that couldn't be fixed with belated birthday wishes or hollow apologies. For the first time in my life, I saw my children clearly, not as the babies I had raised and sacrificed everything for, but as the entitled, selfish adults they had become. And I knew I would never see them the same way again. That night, after discovering the extent of my children's betrayal, I experienced the most profound emotional collapse of my life. Worse than when Frank died, because at least then I had honest grief, not this toxic mixture of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. I paced my empty house, moving from room to room like a ghost, touching photographs of smiling faces that now seemed like cruel mockeries. In the living room, a large family portrait from Christmas dominated the mantel. Everyone dressed in matching red sweaters, my grandchildren flanking me on either side, my 3 children and their spouses arranged behind us. All smiling. All pretending to care about me. Had they been planning their theft even then? Had they smiled for the camera, while mentally spending my retirement savings on Italian leather and Mediterranean cruises? Around midnight, I collapsed onto my bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling Frank and I had painted together 40 years earlier. The memories flooded back, overwhelming me. Frank up on the ladder, paint dripping on his forehead. Me below, 8 months pregnant with Thomas, directing where he needed to touch up. We had been poor then too, but rich in ways my children would never understand. Where did I go wrong with them, Frank? I whispered to the empty room. Was I too generous? Not generous enough? Did I make them this way? Sleep eluded me as I mentally catalogued other instances of disrespect and manipulation that I had overlooked or excused over the years. Richard borrowing $5,000 for a down payment on a new car, despite making 6 figures at his accounting firm. He never repaid it. Margaret having me babysit her children 3 times a week for years without compensation, canceling at the last minute when better plans arose, but expecting me to always be available. Thomas and Kathleen living in my basement for 8 months after college to save for a house, but spending lavishly on concerts and designer clothes while contributing nothing to household expenses. The emergency family meeting called when I'd mentioned donating some money to the hospital charity fund instead of keeping it in the family. The pointed comments when I bought myself a new winter coat. Must be nice to have extra money to throw around. The constant pressure to pay for family vacations, grandchildren's expensive summer camps, and holiday gifts, while they updated their homes and vehicles regularly. My life had become a one-way flow of love, time, and resources. I gave, they took. I accommodated, they expected. I forgave, they exploited. Around 3 in the morning, a sharp pain radiated through my chest and left arm. My breath came in short gasps, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. Heart attack, I thought, reaching for the phone with trembling fingers. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Blood pressure 210/110. Dangerously high but not a heart attack. Acute stress reaction, the ER doctor explained after running tests at Memorial, the same hospital where I'd worked for 4 decades. Your body is responding to extreme emotional distress. As I lay in the emergency room bed, a familiar face appeared. Diane Norton, a nurse I'd mentored years ago before my retirement. Eleanor? What on earth are you doing here? She asked, immediately checking my foreign vitals with the efficiency I'd taught her. Apparently having a breakdown, I attempted a weak smile. Where are your kids? Should I call them? The question brought fresh tears. Between sobs, I told her everything. The birthday, the money, the Italy trip, the betrayal. Diane listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly troubled. Eleanor, I hate to say this, but what you're describing is elder financial abuse, she said finally, sitting on the edge of my bed. I see it more than you'd believe. Family members taking advantage, using emotional manipulation to access funds, justifying it as early inheritance, or claiming they deserve it for providing basic care. Abuse. The word felt foreign in my mouth when applied to my own children. Yes, abuse, Diane confirmed gently. And it rarely stops on its own. Once they've crossed that line and justified it to themselves, it usually escalates. She shared stories of other elderly patients she'd encountered, their savings depleted by adult children, some left destitute after a lifetime of hard work. The patterns were eerily similar to my situation. What did these other people do? I asked. How did they stop it? The ones who fared best? Diane squeezed my hand. They set hard boundaries. Some had to make difficult decisions to protect themselves, including legal action or cutting contact until proper amends were made. As dawn broke outside my hospital window, something broke and reformed within me as well. The sadness that had consumed me began transforming into something else: determination. My children had calculated that I would be too loving, too forgiving, too desperate for their affection to stand up for myself. They had weaponized my maternal love against me. I raised them better than this, I said finally, my voice stronger. Yes, you did, Diane agreed. Which means they know better. They've made deliberate choices, Eleanor. And now you need to make yours. She was right. I had spent 75 years putting others first. I had sacrificed my youth, my personal dreams, and my financial security for my children. And in return, they had decided I was disposable, a resource to be drained rather than a person to be cherished. As the doctor discharged me with instructions to rest and avoid stress, an ironic prescription given the circumstances, I made a decision. I would not be a victim. Not of my children's selfishness, not of my own misplaced loyalty, not of the cultural expectation that mothers should give endlessly without complaint. For the first time in decades, maybe for the first time ever, I would put myself first. And my children, enjoying their stolen vacation in Italy, had no idea what was coming. The day after my hospital visit, I called Patricia Winters, an attorney I'd met through volunteer work at the hospital. Patricia specialized in elder law and had always struck me as both compassionate and formidable, exactly what I needed now. Eleanor, I'm so sorry this has happened to you, Patricia said after I explained my situation. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon. The good news is we have options. She reviewed my financial documents and property records, confirming what I already knew. The house was solely in my name. Frank and I had paid it off completely before his death, and I'd never added the children to the deed, despite Richard's occasional suggestions that I should for estate planning purposes. Your son had no legal right to transfer funds from your accounts without explicit permission for each transaction, Patricia explained. Being a signatory doesn't make it his money. We could pursue this as theft, potentially even criminal charges. The thought of my son in legal trouble despite everything made my stomach clench. What are my alternatives? You control your primary asset, the house. You can do whatever you want with it, she said. And I strongly recommend securing your remaining funds immediately before they take more. I left Patricia's office with a clear plan and her promise to expedite the necessary paperwork. My next stop was Heartland Bank, where I opened new accounts at a different branch from where Richard and I had done business. I transferred my remaining funds, approximately $75,000, and removed Richard from all my accounts. The bank manager looked concerned. Mrs. Gardner, does your son know you're making these changes? My son forfeited his right to information about my finances when he stole from me, I replied, surprising myself with my firmness. From there, I drove to Sunshine Realty, where I met with Janet Peterson, a silver-haired dynamo in her 60s who had helped my neighbor sell her house the previous year. The market is hot right now, Janet confirmed after viewing my property. For bedrooms, established neighborhood, good schools, original hardwood floors. We could list at $425,000 and likely get multiple offers within days. How quickly could we close? I asked. Janet raised an eyebrow. In a rush, Eleanor? Let's just say I have a timeline in mind. As Janet and I discussed strategies for a quick sale, she mentioned something that caught my attention. You know, the Miller's house next door to you just came on the market yesterday. Smaller than yours, 2-bedroom ranch, but completely renovated last year. They're moving to Arizona to be near their daughter. A strange coincidence or perhaps fate. I asked Janet to show me the house immediately. The Miller's home was indeed smaller than mine, but beautifully maintained with modern updates throughout. A first-floor master bedroom with an accessible bathroom, a manageable yard, and most importantly, a clear view of my current house from the front windows. "I'll take it," I said before we'd even finished the tour. Janet blinked in surprise. "Don't you want to think about it? Maybe compare other properties?"
No.
"This is perfect. Perfect for my needs, perfect for my plan, perfect for the new life I was creating." Over the next few days I worked with a whirlwind of professionals. Janet to list my house and make an offer on the Millers, Patricia to handle the legal aspects, and a financial advisor recommended by Patricia to create a secure retirement plan with my remaining funds and the proceeds from my home sale. Meanwhile, I began the process of reclaiming my life in other ways. I called my old friend Doris, whom I'd lost touch with because my children always seemed to need me whenever Doris and I made plans. "Eleanor Gardner, as I live and breathe," Doris exclaimed when she heard my voice. "I thought you'd fallen off the face of the earth." We met for lunch and I told her everything. Unlike the shock and pity I'd feared, Doris responded with righteous indignation on my behalf. "Those ungrateful brats," she fumed. "After everything you've done for them." You know what? My sister went through something similar with her daughter. Ended up selling her house and buying a condo in that senior community, Lakeside Gardens. She says it's the best decision she ever made. Lakeside Gardens. I'd driven past the attractive complex of condominiums and small houses many times. It featured activities, security, and a built-in community of people in my age group. I made an appointment to tour it the following day, keeping my options open. As my plan took shape, I also dealt with the emotional work of detaching from my family home. I walked through each room, identifying the items that truly mattered to me, the things imbued with genuine meaning rather than obligatory sentimentality. Frank's pocket watch, our wedding album, the children's baby books and a few select photographs, my grandmother's recipe box, the quilt my mother had made for our wedding, the rocking chair where I'd nursed all 3 babies. I was surprised by how few items made the final list. For decades, I'd been the family repository, storing everyone's memorabilia, from participation trophies to school projects to outgrown clothes they might want someday. I decided that era was over. I would take what mattered to me. The rest they could deal with upon their return. 1 week after my birthday, Janet called with news that electrified me. "Eleanor, we have 5 offers on your house. The highest is $455,000, all cash, with a request for expedited closing. They're willing to close in 2 weeks if you can move out by then." Everything was falling into place with a speed that felt almost miraculous. My offer on the Miller's house had been accepted. Patricia had secured the necessary paperwork to protect my assets. And now my house was selling for more than I dreamed possible. That night I received a group text from Margaret. "Having the best time in Venice. Taking a gondola ride tomorrow. Hope everything's good at home, Mom. We'll bring you back something special.
À souvenir."
They thought a trinket from Italy would compensate for stealing my money and abandoning me on my birthday. I didn't respond. Let them think I was just a hurt old woman, nursing my wounds until their return when they would placate me with gifts and insincere apologies. Let them think I would be waiting in the same house in the same circumstances, ready to resume my role as their convenient mother, financial safety net, and unpaid babysitter. They had no idea that Eleanor Gardner was done being taken for granted. The woman they would find upon their return would be unrecognizable to them, not just in circumstances but in resolve. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. For the first time in years, I really looked at myself. Silver hair that I'd never bothered to color because who had I been trying to impress? Lines etched around my eyes and mouth from decades of expressions, both joyful and sorrowful. The slightly stooped posture I developed from years of bending over hospital beds. Time for a change, I told my reflection. A complete change. The next day, I made an appointment at an upscale salon downtown. The kind my daughters-in-law frequented, but I had always considered too extravagant. Time to stop thinking that way. Time to stop denying myself small pleasures after a lifetime of work. I had just over 2 weeks to execute my plan before my family returned from Italy. 2 weeks to dismantle my old life and construct a new one. 2 weeks to transform from the doormat they had wiped their feet on into the woman I should have been all along. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I slept through the night, my dreams not of loss but of liberation. The next 14 days passed in a blur of purposeful activity. My house sold for $455,000 to a lovely young couple expecting their first child. They had been outbid on several properties and were thrilled to find a family home in an established neighborhood. I felt a sense of rightness in passing my home to people who would fill it with the genuine love and respect that had been lacking in my own family's visits in recent years. The expedited closing meant I needed to move quickly. I hired a professional organizing service to help me sort through decades of accumulated possessions. Together we created 4 categories: items to keep, items to sell, items to donate, and items belonging to my children that would be stored in the garage for them to deal with upon their return. My purchase of the Miller's house next door closed just 3 days after my own home sale. The timing worked perfectly, allowing me to move my chosen belongings the short distance without requiring extensive transportation. The proceeds from my house sale, after paying off the Miller's property, left me with over $250,000 to add to my remaining savings, creating a secure nest egg that my children could never access. We should set up a power of attorney that isn't Richard, Patricia advised during our final meeting. Someone you trust completely. I nominated Doris, who accepted the responsibility with appropriate seriousness. I'll guard your interests like they're my own, Eleanor. No one's taking advantage of you on my watch. With my finances secured and my move underway, I turned my attention to personal transformation. At Elegance Salon I met with Sophia, a stylist with an artistic eye and gentle hands. I want something completely different, I told her. I've had the same hairstyle for 30 years. Sophia studied my face thoughtfully. I see a sophisticated bob, perhaps? With some subtle highlights to brighten your complexion? And we could shape your eyebrows to lift your face. 3 hours later, I hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. My previously shapeless gray hair now fell in a sleek chin-length style with caramel highlights that brought out the amber flecks in my brown eyes. My newly defined eyebrows gave my face a more alert, youthful appearance. From the salon, I went directly to Nordstrom, where I'd booked a session with a personal shopper. Another extravagance I'd always denied myself. I need a completely new wardrobe, I explained to Melissa, the stylish consultant assigned to me. I've spent my life in practical clothes, scrubs for work, jeans and sweaters at home. I want something that reflects who I am now, not who I've been. Melissa didn't blink at this request from a 75-year-old woman. Instead, she nodded appreciatively. I love helping with transformations. Tell me about your new lifestyle and how you want to feel in your clothes. I left the store with several classic, well-cut outfits that flattered my figure rather than hiding it. Gone were the shapeless sweaters and elastic waist pants. In their place were tailored trousers, silky blouses, and even a stunning red dress for special occasions. As the moving date approached, I made one final crucial purchase. A state-of-the-art security system for my new home, complete with surveillance cameras that would give me a perfect view of my former house's front entrance. I wanted to witness my family's return firsthand, but from the safety and comfort of my new home. The day before the new owners took possession of my old house, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The furniture I'd kept had already been moved next door. The walls were bare of family photographs. The closets emptied of the extra belongings I'd stored for my children over the years. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the countertop where I'd prepared thousands of meals. In the living room, I stood where the Christmas tree had been placed every year. In each bedroom, I recalled bedtime stories, teenage dramas, and quiet conversations. But rather than sadness, I felt an unexpected lightness. These rooms held memories, yes, but they also represented years of thankless sacrifice and unreciprocated giving. Walking away wasn't a loss but a reclamation of myself. I spent my first night in the Miller house, now my house, surrounded by only my most treasured possessions. The space felt right-sized, manageable, and most importantly, completely mine. From my new bedroom window, I could see the sold sign in front of my former home. The new owners would move in tomorrow, setting the stage for my family's return 4 days later. During those final days of waiting, I settled into my new space and my new identity. I joined the community center down the street, signed up for a watercolor class I'd always wanted to take, and had lunch with Doris and 2 of her friends who welcomed me warmly into their weekly gathering. I also met several of my new neighbors, none of whom knew me as Richard, Margaret, and Thomas's mother, but simply as Eleanor, the new resident with the stylish haircut and interesting background in nursing. The freedom to define myself on my own terms was intoxicating. The night before my family's scheduled return, I received another group text, this one from Thomas. Heading home tomorrow. Can't wait to show you all our pictures and give you your birthday presents. See you soon, Mom. I smiled at the phone but didn't respond. Let them discover the truth in real time. The next morning I positioned myself in my front room, where I had a clear view of my former home's entrance through the large picture window. The surveillance system sent a live feed to my tablet, giving me an even closer view. Then I settled in to wait. They arrived around 2 in the afternoon, 3 separate cars pulling into the driveway one after another. Richard and Brenda first, followed by Margaret and Paul, with Thomas and Kathleen bringing up the rear. All of them tanned and smiling, unloading luggage emblazoned with Italian designer labels that my retirement savings had purchased. Through the surveillance camera, I watched Richard try his key in the front door, then frown and try again. He knocked, waited, then knocked harder. Thomas joined him, peering through the front windows while Margaret made a phone call, presumably to me. My cell phone rang on the table beside me. I let it go to voicemail. The confusion on the driveway escalated as the new owners, right on cue, pulled up in their SUV. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could imagine it clearly enough. The bewilderment, the explanations, the growing panic as my children realized what had happened. Richard paced back and forth, gesticulating wildly while making a phone call. Margaret sat on the front steps, head in her hands. Thomas stood frozen in apparent shock. My phone rang again and again and again. Voicemails accumulated, their tones evolving from confusion to panic to anger. Mom, there are strangers in your house. Call me immediately. Mom, what's going on? Where are you? We're worried. Mother, this isn't funny. What have you done? Call me back now. I watched through my window as they gathered in a tight circle on the driveway, heads bent together in urgent discussion. Then, as if by mutual agreement, they all turned and looked directly at my new house, my presence somehow sensed or suspected. The moment had arrived. I smoothed my new blouse, checked my appearance in the hallway mirror, and opened my front door just as Richard raised his hand to knock. The shocked expressions on their faces as they registered not just my presence in the house next door, but my completely transformed appearance, was everything I had hoped for and more. For once in their adult lives, my children were completely speechless. Hello, I said calmly. Welcome back from Italy. I believe we have some things to discuss. The confrontation that followed on my new front porch was something I'll never forget. 6 stunned faces staring at me like I was a stranger, which in many ways I had become. Mom, Richard finally managed. What is happening? Why did you sell the house? And why are you living here? I gestured to my living room. Why don't you all come inside? The neighbors don't need to witness this conversation. They filed in silently, taking in my new home with its carefully selected furnishings and distinct absence of the family memorabilia that had cluttered my previous house. I directed them to sit, though there weren't enough seats for everyone, a deliberate choice on my part. Thomas and Kathleen remained standing awkwardly by the doorway. I made some changes while you were enjoying Italy, I said, my voice steady. I sold the house, bought this one, and reorganized my finances. Without telling us? Margaret's voice rose indignantly. How could you make such a huge decision without consulting us? The irony of her question hung in the air for a moment before I replied. The same way you decided to spend $50,000 of my retirement savings on a luxury vacation without consulting me. Their expressions cycled through shock, guilt, and defensiveness in rapid succession. That was different, Richard began. I was going to pay that back. When? I asked simply. And with what money? The money you're always complaining you don't have despite your 6-figure income? The money that never seems to materialize when it's time to contribute to family expenses, but always appears for your new cars and vacation homes. He had no answer. You stole from me, I continued. All of you participated in taking my hard-earned money without permission, excluding me from a family vacation on my 75th birthday, and then expecting me to welcome you back with open arms. We brought you presents, Thomas offered weakly, gesturing to a shopping bag he'd dropped by the door. I don't want presents bought with my own stolen money, I replied. What I wanted was respect, consideration, the basic decency of acknowledging my birthday with more than a hastily scribbled card. So this is all about your birthday? Brenda interjected. You sold our family home because you were upset about a birthday? Our family home? I turned to her slowly. I wasn't aware your name was on the deed, Brenda. In fact, I paid off that mortgage before any of you were married. And no, this isn't about a birthday. It's about years of taking me for granted, treating me like a convenience, an ATM, and a free childcare service while giving nothing in return. I addressed each of my children directly. Richard, you had no right to transfer money from my accounts without explicit permission for each transaction. What you did wasn't borrowing or family financial planning. It was theft, and I could have pressed charges. Richard blanched, finally grasping the seriousness of his actions. Margaret, for years you've scheduled your life assuming I would drop everything to care for your children whenever asked, canceling at the last minute when better options arose, but expecting me to always be available. That stops now. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but I continued. Thomas, you and Kathleen lived in my basement for 8 months, saving for a house, while spending lavishly and contributing nothing. That pattern of taking without giving has characterized our relationship for decades. I took a deep breath. I raised you better than this. I worked double shifts for years to give you everything you needed. I went without so you could have opportunities. And in return, you decided my retirement savings were your vacation fund, and my milestone birthday wasn't worth acknowledging except as an afterthought. Silence filled the room. Outside, through the window, we could see the new owners of my former house unloading their belongings, starting their new life in the home where I had raised my ungrateful children. What about our things? Paul finally asked. All our stuff that was stored in your house. In the garage of the old house, I replied. I informed the new owners that you would be collecting it this week. They've been very accommodating. You just got rid of everything? Margaret's voice wavered between disbelief and anger. I kept what matters to me, I corrected her. The rest is yours to deal with, just like I've dealt with it for the past several decades. So what now? Richard asked, his accountant's mind already calculating, planning. You'll run out of money eventually without the house as an asset. Then what? You'll need us. I smiled, enjoying the moment. Actually, Richard, I sold the house for $455,000. After purchasing this smaller property, I have over $250,000 added to my remaining savings. Combined with my pension and Social Security, I'm quite comfortable. And I've appointed Doris Wallace as my power of attorney, with Patricia Winters handling my legal affairs. You no longer have access to any of my accounts. The shock on his face was priceless. You can't just cut us out of your life, Thomas protested. We're your family. I'm not cutting you out, I clarified.
I'm establishing boundaries.
Moving forward, we can have a relationship based on mutual respect and consideration, or we can have no relationship at all. The choice is yours. And what does that mean exactly? Margaret asked warily. It means no more unlimited access to my time, home, or finances. No more assumptions that I'll babysit whenever you want. No more storage for your belongings. No more financial help that never gets repaid. If you want to be in my life, it will be as respectful adults visiting another adult, not as entitled children expecting constant giving from their mother. I let my words sink in before continuing. I've joined the community center, started taking art classes, and made new friends. I'm building a life that's about me for the first time in over 50 years. You're welcome to be part of that life, but only if you can respect the woman I am now, not just the mother who sacrificed everything for you. The conversation continued for another hour, cycling through their anger, bargaining, guilt-tripping, and finally reluctant acceptance. They left in a much different mood than they had arrived, forced to confront the consequences of their actions perhaps for the first time in their adult lives. In the weeks and months that followed, our relationships underwent a painful but necessary evolution. Richard, after initial resistance, was the first to offer a genuine apology, followed by repayment of the money he had taken, though I suspected Brenda had forced his hand after realizing the potential legal consequences of his actions. Margaret struggled the most with our new dynamic, testing boundaries repeatedly before finally accepting that her automatic childcare service was no longer available on demand. Eventually, she began scheduling proper visits with me, during which I got to be a grandmother enjoying my grandchildren's company rather than an unpaid babysitter. Thomas and Kathleen, surprisingly, adapted best to the new normal. Perhaps as the youngest, Thomas had the most capacity for change, or maybe he genuinely regretted his actions most sincerely. They began inviting me to dinner at their home monthly, a reversal of roles that felt both strange and wonderful. As for me, I blossomed in ways I never expected at 75. My watercolor class led to a small exhibition at the community center. I joined a book club and a walking group. I even began dating Harold, a charming widower I met during a community theater production, something that scandalized my children but delighted me. On my 76th birthday, I hosted a party in my new home. My children and grandchildren attended, bearing gifts they had purchased with their own money. Doris and her friends came, as did several of my new neighbors, my watercolor instructor and Harold, who brought a stunning orchid and danced with me on my small patio under string lights. It wasn't perfect. The relationships with my children remained works in progress, the trust not fully rebuilt. But as I blew out the candles on my cake, surrounded by a mix of old and new connections, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: genuine happiness on my own terms. The greatest gift I gave myself wasn't selling the house or securing my finances, though those were important steps. The greatest gift was recognizing my own worth and demanding that others recognize it too. At 75, I had finally learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, and to create the life you deserve. As I look back on that tumultuous time now, I realize that my children's betrayal, painful as it was, gave me an unexpected freedom. In responding to their worst behavior, I discovered my best self. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the greatest act of love sometimes isn't what you give to others, but what you finally allow yourself to receive.